Okay, let's go. This is the second game of my tournament, and I played as white. Um, I, I don't know what else I can say about it. I've been trying to play, so I usually only play d4, but I've been trying to play some d4. Um, so I've been experimenting with openings, but this game I just played e4. And my opponent played a Scandinavian. Take queen takes. There's some interesting thing here that I should probably look at some point, because I believe that knight c3 is, I mean, that's the normal move, of course, but I think it is totally fine. I think it might even be better to delay it by one move and play d4 first, which is what happened. And my opponent played e5 immediately, which basically forces a trade of everything. I mean, I play d4, they play e5, so I have to take. Queen takes, and here, I mean, I could still just play like bishop e2, knight e2 or something, but I decided queen e2, that makes sense to me. Bishop e3 doesn't work because I lose there. And my opponent just takes, and here in retrospect I should probably take with the knight, which looks weird, but I took with the bishop. And the reason is that my opponent here gets bishop f5, and I basically have to play c3, and now the development is slightly in black's favor. Whereas if here I take with the knight on bishop f4, I get knight d4. I don't have to play c3 yet, and I could even castle long in this position, which here after c3 I did not want to do anymore. I do not have the notation with me, but I think it should just be fine regardless. I'm not sure. I believe the move was knight f6 here. Might have been the bishop first. I don't think it really matters, but the moment the knight gets here, I attack it with the bishop, and then the knight defends, and I develop my knight, and opponent develops the bishop to, I want to say d6. Yeah, I'm fairly certain it was d6. And I develop my knight, and we just have developed everything. My opponent castles. Actually, maybe they played h6 first. I think they played h6 first. And I just moved back because I wanted to maintain the pressure on this knight. This knight on d7 can't move, as long as my bishop is here. And I didn't think this trade would be that bad. But my opponent castled here. And here I had the opportunity to play knight d4, which I didn't do. I was afraid of this issue. But knight d4, bishop like h7 or something, and knight b5 was an option, which basically crushes the pawn structure here. Maybe you can even play bishop e5 here, because I don't have f4. Maybe that's still fine, but I was kind of afraid of this. Take. And because bishop d3 is a serious threat here, I basically have to play king f8, king f1 here, or king d1, but I think I would have played king f1. So it's kind of, maybe this is good for me, I'm not sure. So I didn't do that, I just castled. I didn't want to castle long either, because there were some issues with this diagonal, and like, if they ever sack on c3, this diagonal could be scary as well. There's some checkmate issues, actually, surprisingly, despite there not being any queens anymore. So I just castled short. And here g5, yeah. g5, bishop g3, and my opponent weakens their own pawn structure, but also weakens mine, because I am now forced to get a double pawn. And I took with the f pawn to immediately open up this rook, creating some issues. I'm actually threatening knight takes g5 here. So bishop went to g6, and I moved my knight still. I played knight d4 here, and with the plan of going to f5 and putting pressure. And here, my opponent had to basically defend. Well, they can't defend f5, but they can defend e7. So rook a to e8 happened here. And I did not play knight f5. What was it? Oh, what did I play? Was it the other rook to e1? No. What was it again? I remember looking at this move. I didn't want to play bishop b5 because c6 I think is an improvement for black. I also don't think I moved the bishop yet. Oh, what was it? No, it might have been bishop f3 here. No, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. It was no, it was just rook ae8 or rook ae1. No, I remember this point. Yeah. Yeah, because it wasn't. There was some. I moved this first and then bishop f3. That's what happened. I believe it was knight d5, trying to go here. And I defended that with knight f5, and they can still take here and play knight e3, but that's not that big of a deal, I don't think. Because my goal is to win the bishop. So, and this is a weakness, and this is, I mean, that knight is strong, but it's no big deal. But I'm also notably attacking this pawn, which my opponent kind of has to deal with. But I don't think they played king h7 here. I believe it was knight. There was a move. They attacked a piece of mine, and I believe, or threatened something. So even if I took this with check, then I wouldn't win. There was a moment where I could have, but I didn't. Or could have, but it would have lost. Wasn't? No. What? This knight stayed. I believe it was. What was it again? Was it king h7? It might have been king h7 here. Just anyways. No, it wasn't. Because my next move is bishop f3, which forces this trade. Was it knight f6? No. No, this knight was undefended. And it was a knight e3. Why can't I remember? It wasn't threatening to double the rooks either. That happened a lot later. And it wasn't rook e5, that also happened later. That might have just been king h7. Yeah, I think let's just do king h7. I think that's correct. And here I wanted to move this bishop out. And this is basically the same, because it basically forces my opponent to take the knight anyways. So I played here, take, c6, and yeah. No, not c6. Because this bishop is hanging. And this pawn is hanging, but I can't take the pawn, but I still played c6 after this. Was it knight c5? It might have been knight c5. No. No, right? No, this knight stayed there. No, it wasn't b6, wasn't c6. It might have, actually it might have been c6. Because this trade is still totally fine, because if they take here I have to take here in between, but then I take the other bishop myself. And that's a slightly better position for me because of the isolated pawn here. So they just move the bishop. Oh, but now there's bishop c3 or bishop d3. That wasn't in the game, right? Maybe I get hit this though, and here bishop takes. So maybe it was, maybe this is correct. I believe it was something like this. I mean, this position looks something like what happened. Actually, you know what's stupid? I can just look it up online because right, the games are actually uploaded. Yeah, okay, I just have the game. So let's check starting from move 15. That's correct. Rook a. No, it wasn't rook a8. Ah, that's why. Okay, sorry. Knight d4, knight d5. Which I thought was a move later, but it was knight f5, now rook a8. I mean, that doesn't matter, but still. And bishop f3, and here bishop f3, trade, and c6, right? No, oh, my rook isn't here. That's the difference. So I forgot. Yeah, and then here, so bishop d3 wasn't actually winning anything. So that's why. And rook. Oh yeah, I remember this. Rook e1. Now c6 happened, and I moved my bishop back. The king moved up to defend this and move up as well. And here I was kind of surprised by what my opponent did, or at least after my move. I wanted to play knight e4 and get my knight somewhere here. And I assumed what would happen was knight e5, basically winning my bishop for the knight. I'd play this, check, fixing my pawn structure slightly, and b6 or something, and I'd play this with a strong knight versus a reasonable bishop. But an absolutely... oh, actually, sorry. Not b6, because the rook is hanging. You can take here, of course, but... yeah, I think that's probably... okay, and then not b5, b4. I was thinking something like this. And then we'd play this. I'd infiltrate, though. So... maybe you can't do this as black. Let's look at it, though, afterwards. Knight e4. I assumed knight e5 and just win my bishop. But my opponent just takes, which I thought was weird. Bishop takes, because now I can play for something with this bishop versus knight. And my opponent tries to double. Rook e5, and I... well, this is going to be a pin and second attack on my bishop, so I have to move it, or I have to do something immediately. Rook a d1 also works, but bishop c5 would be annoying, I think. So I just moved. The other rook and comes to the e-file, and I have to defend my rook or move it, which I don't want to do because then rook e2 happens. Actually, I need to defend these two, so I only have one option, but I expected this. King of 2. And the rook goes to e6 here, with some issues here. Basically, this is kind of a draw, but not... I think even black is even better here, if they get rook f6. So I basically... well, I kind of forced my opponent to play. So rook f6 here would be less good, because both of these would be hanging. Basically forcing a rook trade and giving me the e-file, which I would be okay with. Would probably be quite good for me. Or they can move the knight and give... I take here and give take the d-file, which could also have been interesting. But instead my opponent just trades. Basically we did nothing just now. And plays knight e5. This knight is very strong, but I also... it creates some issues here sometimes. But I can barely hold on, and this bishop is also really good. So rook goes to e7 because it's attacked. Yeah, rook e7, and I plant the bishop in with g4. So this is basically I mean, this bishop is basically stopping the knight and the rook from moving. This rook is stopping the knight, really, because the knight is properly pinned. The bishop stops the rook from doing anything. So yeah, I thought I was doing very well here. King f6 happened, and that can create... oh yeah, that unpins, so I want to prevent this knight from moving. And the only real square it can go to is here, which also does stuff, so I didn't want to allow that. b3 and c5, which I think is a very good move, trying to play c4. Knight c6 is not that big of a deal, I don't really care. And here I blundered, which is really sad. So my bishop is really holding my position together, and I basically lose control of it because I blundered a g-pawn. I played a sensible move, I thought. I should just play rook d1 probably and not care about this pressure and just go here or here. I missed that rook d6 was an option in the game. But I played rook e4, which I thought was quite sensible, and then suddenly this happened. Because the bishop... if the bishop takes, then I lose the rook, and if the rook takes, I lose my bishop. So now and it's check, so I can't take the rook in between. So now I lose because I have to do... I tried this, which is a good attempt because they can't take my bishop because then I take the rook. And if they take the rook, then I just take and win my pawn back. But they just go back, and now my bishop has to run, and it's really terrible because now the knight can even jump in. And I don't want to show the rest, but a couple of moves later I resigned because I also because this bishop gets hunted and I allow this, and then it's just game over. So yeah, I played this. This was quite a long game, but it was also kind of boring. Oh, apparently you shouldn't take. You should play knight f3 apparently. Yeah, knight takes makes sense. Yeah, black is slightly better, that makes sense. But I had the option of playing d4, knight d4. And then, yeah. It's still fine, it's basically zeros everywhere. Yeah, it's basically all zeros. But knight e5 would have actually been okay for me because of, yeah, knight c5. Not knight d6 actually, but knight c5. And it's difficult. You can't really hold on to the pawn. But yeah, this is better apparently. Yeah, but it's... I mean, it's always very slightly better, but it's just nothing really. Yeah, and that's a blunder, and now now it's just gone. Yeah. Played one inaccuracy and blundered a pawn, and that's the entire game. And my opponent played no inaccuracies. Yeah, that's what you get. See you in the next one.